She showed up in her wedding dress, alone, dumped at the altar for being too fat. No family, no home, no hope left. Until a single dad with nothing to give gave her the one thing she needed most: a door that opened, and a child who called her Mom. This isn't just a story about love. It's about the kind of grace that shows up quietly, in a house with peeling paint, and a porch swing that remembers the weight of second chances. If stories like this remind you that kindness still matters, take a second to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Now, let me tell you what happened the day she knocked on his door. The bridal shop was quiet, lit only by soft lamplight and the whisper of fabric being pinned, pressed, and adjusted. It was nearly 7 p.m., long past closing hours, but Willa May wasn't ready to leave. She rarely was these days. The mirror in front of her reflected a woman in her 30s, not young, not old, not perfect, but full of quiet hopes stitched into the seams of the ivory gown she wore. Her hands, slightly calloused from years of sewing, trembled as they adjusted the hem. "This is the one," she whispered to herself, voice catching in her throat. "This is finally the one." She had made dozens of gowns in her small-town studio. Gowns for women with long lashes and slim waists and laughter that rang like bells. Women who had walked into her shop nervous and left glowing. She had watched them try on lace and chiffon and silk, sometimes envious, sometimes proud, always careful not to show either. But this one, this gown, she had sewn it in the quiet of midnight and the loneliness of early morning. It was for her. Rick had proposed after 6 months of secretive dinners and polite silences. He was charming and safe in that distant sort of way. He never really looked at her, not like that, but he smiled, and he was kind, and he made her believe that perhaps she wasn't too much, too big, too quiet, too invisible. "Simple," he'd said when she asked what kind of dress he liked. "Nothing too flashy." So she designed a modest silhouette, fitted bodice, A-line skirt, sleeves that fell just below the elbow. She didn't try to hide her curves, but she softened them. She'd told herself she didn't care what anyone else thought. She only needed him to show up. The wedding was set for tomorrow afternoon. The church had been booked. The cake was ready. Darla, her best friend and the local baker, had made sure of that. Willa hadn't allowed herself to feel excitement, only relief. Relief that someone had finally chosen her. But as she turned in the mirror, something didn't sit right. She didn't feel like a bride. She felt like someone pretending. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. Her fingers fumbled, then froze. "Willa, it's Rick. I'm sorry. I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. Please don't try to call me." For a long time, the shop was silent, except for the soft mechanical hum of the old fridge in the back room. Her hand, still holding the phone, dropped to her side. Her reflection wavered as her body began to shake. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she slowly sat down on the small velvet chair in the corner, her dress pooling around her like spilled cream. What hurt the most wasn't that he left. Some part of her had expected it. What broke her was the fact that even now, even after all this, a small voice in her whispered, "Of course he did. Who would stay?" She sat there until the room grew dim, until the shadows stretched and the night crept in through the shop's front windows. Eventually, she stood, changed out of the gown, folded it with shaking hands, and placed it gently into the box she had saved for the occasion. The box was white, embossed with golden lettering. For the day she'll never forget. She almost laughed. The church was only 2 blocks away. It was too late to cancel the booking. Maybe it was habit, or maybe it was hope in its final breath, but Willa walked there, carrying the dress like it still mattered. The sun had dipped low, casting the steeple in a soft orange glow. The parking lot was empty, the chapel silent. She sat on the old stone steps and placed the dress beside her. And that's where Bo Carter found her. He wasn't looking for anyone. He was just walking his 6-year-old son, Finn, back from the library. It was their Friday ritual. Bo, a carpenter by trade, had grown quieter since his wife died 3 years ago. Finn was his world, but grief had taught them both to live small. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Daddy, why is that lady crying?" Bo looked. She wasn't crying, not exactly, but her eyes were distant. Her mouth trembled in a way that told him it was taking all she had not to fall apart. Her hands gripped a box wrapped in ivory ribbon like it held something precious, or something broken. He hesitated. Normally, he would have walked on. He didn't get involved. But something about her, maybe the way the wind played with her hair, or how carefully she'd set that box down beside her, felt like a story unfinished. "Ma'am?" he asked gently. Willa blinked, startled. She tried to smile, but it cracked halfway. "Sorry, I'm fine, just waiting for someone." Bo didn't push. He nodded, glancing at Finn, who had wandered a few feet closer and was now peering at the box. "Is it a cake?" the boy asked. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "It's a dress." "Is it yours?" "Yes." "Are you getting married?" Her throat tightened. She managed a small shake of the head. "Not anymore." Finn looked at his father, puzzled. Bo stepped forward, unsure of what he was doing until he heard his own voice. "We live just a few blocks down. You're welcome to come rest for a bit, if you'd like." Willa stared at him. Bo smiled, a little awkward. "It's not much, but it's warm, and we've got leftover lasagna." She looked at the church doors, at the box beside her, then at this man and his wide-eyed little boy, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." Bo picked up the box without asking. It was lighter than he expected. They walked in silence. The night settled around them, and somewhere between the chapel steps and the Carter front porch, something small, something unseen, began to mend. The Carter house sat on the edge of town, framed by weather-worn picket fences and an old maple tree that had shed most of its leaves. It was the kind of place that looked ordinary in daylight, but in the soft hush of evening, it radiated a quiet kind of warmth, like the home of someone who had once believed in laughter and hadn't quite forgotten how. Willa stepped onto the porch with hesitation. She felt out of place, like a stranger intruding on someone else's normal. The porch creaked beneath her feet, and a single bulb above the door flickered as if questioning her presence. Bo unlocked the door and stepped aside to let her in. "It's not much, but it's home," he said, not out of apology, but simple honesty. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and sawdust. A half-built birdhouse sat on the kitchen table, surrounded by wood shavings and tiny nails. There were dishes in the sink, a stack of schoolbooks on the counter, and a faded quilt draped over the back of a worn armchair. It wasn't clean in the curated way of magazine homes, but it was lived in, loved, and real. "Make yourself comfortable," Bo said, setting her box gently near the coat rack. "I'll heat up some dinner." Willa nodded wordlessly, clutching her purse like it might disappear. Finn had already kicked off his shoes and was now attempting to untie her laces. "You don't have to," she began. "I'm good at it," he said proudly, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. "Mom taught me." The room fell still. The word "Mom" hovered in the air like a ghost. Bo didn't flinch, but his shoulders stiffened slightly as he opened the fridge. "Lasagna okay?" Willa nodded. "Thank you." Again. He warmed the food. Finn chattered about books and dogs and the mean goose at school. and Willa sat at the edge of the couch as though unsure if she was really allowed to touch it. She hadn't sat in a stranger's living room since she was a child, and even then, it had felt less foreign than this moment. As they ate, Bo asked no questions. He didn't prod, didn't dig, didn't offer pity. He simply passed her the garlic bread and made sure her glass of water was full. That kind of silence was new to her. Most people, when they sensed weakness, rushed to fill it with words. Advice, sympathy, platitudes. Bo offered space instead. Space to breathe. Space to be broken without explanation. Finn fell asleep halfway through his second helping. Willa offered to take him to his room, and Bo hesitated. But something in her eyes, something soft and maternal, made him nod. His room was painted a calming blue, with stars stuck to the ceiling and mismatched sheets on the bed. She laid him down gently, pulled the blanket to his chin, and lingered just a moment longer than necessary. He mumbled, barely awake, "Will you still be here tomorrow?" She froze. "I don't know," she whispered. Later, Bo handed her a folded blanket and gestured to the pull-out couch in the den. "You're safe here," he said simply. "No one expects anything, just rest." She took the blanket and sat, brushing her hand along the fabric of the sofa. She had spent the morning preparing for a wedding, and the evening in a stranger's house wearing yesterday's shoes. Somehow, this felt more real than any of it. "You don't want to know?" she asked quietly. Bo stood in the doorway, silhouetted by hallway light. "You'll tell me if you want to." She looked down. "I was supposed to get married tomorrow. I made the dress myself." He left a text. Bo was quiet a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's cruel. I'm sorry." "I thought I finally mattered," she added, barely above a whisper. "But maybe he just wanted someone quiet. Someone easy. I think I was just convenient." Bo leaned against the frame. "Then he didn't deserve you. Simple as that." Willa met his eyes. He wasn't trying to flatter her. He wasn't trying to fix her. He just believed what he said. That, more than anything, made her eyes burn. She lay down with the blanket pulled to her chin, staring at the shadows dancing across the ceiling. She didn't cry. Not fully. But tears came in their own time. Quiet, private, cleansing. At dawn, the house was still. She slipped out to the porch, wrapped in the quilt, watching as a light fog lifted over the fields beyond. The air smelled of wood smoke and dew. A mug of coffee appeared beside her. "Figured you might be up," Bo said, handing it to her. She took it gratefully. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. "You live in a quiet world," she said softly. "I used to like noise," he said. "Then my wife died, and quiet started feeling more like home." Willa glanced at him, surprised by his frankness. "She was kind," he said, staring out toward the trees. "And brave. Fought hard. Cancer." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "We all lose someone. I just hope I raise Finn in a way she'd be proud of." Willa sipped the coffee, let the steam warm her lips. "He's a sweet boy. He likes you. He doesn't even know me. Kids know the good ones before the rest of us do." She smiled faintly, and in that smile was the first flicker of something long buried. Dignity, maybe. Or worth. For the first time in a long time, Willa didn't feel like someone being rescued. She felt like someone arriving. It had been 3 days since Willa May arrived at the Carter house, though it felt like time had slowed and softened around her edges. There was something about the rhythm of this place that settled her nerves like no pill or prayer ever had. The way the morning sun slid across the windowsill in the den. The distant sound of a rooster down the road. The muffled hum of Finn's cartoons before school. It was quiet, but not empty. Still, but not stagnant. And Bo didn't rush her. He hadn't asked when she was leaving, or how long she intended to stay. He simply let her exist within the quiet framework of his home, giving her the dignity of space. He brought her coffee in the mornings, left folded laundry on the armrest of the couch without comment, and occasionally invited her to sit with him on the porch after dinner. They didn't talk about the wedding. Not again. But neither pretended it hadn't happened. That quiet knowing between them was the closest thing to comfort Willa had felt in years. That afternoon, she wandered into the backyard with Finn. He was busy piling rocks in strange shapes, announcing he was building a castle with a trapdoor and a moat, and also maybe a bakery. Willa laughed, a soft, surprised sound that startled even her. She hadn't realized until that moment how long it had been since her laughter felt real. "You can't build a bakery without pie," she told him. Finn paused, eyeing her. "Do you know how to make pie? Apple and pecan, maybe even rhubarb if someone's brave." He grinned and pointed to the kitchen window where Bo was watching. "Dad's brave, but he doesn't like rhubarb. He says it's sour like bad memories." Willa blinked, surprised at the phrasing, but it suited Bo in a strange way. He was a man who had tasted loss and learned not to chase after sweetness too quickly. "Let's make apple then," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. Later, the kitchen came alive with cinnamon, clove, and low conversation. Finn peeled apples while Willa prepared the crust, teaching him how to press the dough with his fingertips and not stretch it too thin. "If you roll it too tight," she warned, "it cracks." Finn squinted at her. "Like people?" She looked up, startled, but then smiled. "Exactly like people." When Bo walked in, his eyebrows lifted at the sight. "Smells like October." "It's July," Willa said, brushing flour from her chin. "Still smells like October." They ate dinner at the kitchen table, an unremarkable meal of meatloaf and green beans, but for Willa it felt like a feast. It wasn't the food. It was the way Finn reached for her hand during grace, the way Bo passed her the butter without needing to be asked. Something about this house, this life, was stitching her back together, thread by thread. After dinner, Willa helped Finn with a craft project for school. He was building a model of a bird, or possibly a dragon. He hadn't decided yet. The feathers kept falling off the glue. "Miss Willa," he asked while adjusting the wings, "how come you're staying here?" She hesitated. "Because I needed a place to rest." "Were you sad?" She nodded. "Yes." "Because someone left you?" Willa glanced at Bo, who sat a few feet away sanding a piece of wood. "Yes," she said softly. "Someone who didn't see me, not really." Finn frowned. "Well, I see you." She smiled, eyes stinging. "And I like your laugh," he added. "You should use it more." Bo looked up at that, their eyes met. And for the first time, Willa didn't look away. That night, she unfolded the box. The wedding dress still lay inside, untouched. She ran her fingers along the edge of the fabric and thought not of Rick, but of herself, of the woman who had stitched it together in the dark, hoping it might be the thing that made her whole. She stood, holding it up in the glow of the hallway lamp. It was beautiful, carefully sewn, delicate but strong. Just like her. She didn't cry this time. She folded it again, gently, deliberately, and returned it to the box, not with grief, but with reverence. It wasn't a tomb now. It was a reminder of who she had been and who she was becoming. The next morning, she found Finn in the backyard again, this time building a tiny swing from twine and sticks. "Want to help?" he asked. Willa sat beside him on the grass. "Sure," she said. They worked in silence, and it didn't feel awkward. It felt safe, like the silence knew them both and chose to stay anyway. When the swing was finished, he handed it to her like a gift. "It's for your dress box, so it doesn't feel so alone." Willa felt her throat tighten again. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say thank you. Thank you." Bo watched them from the porch, arms crossed loosely, a quiet expression on his face that said more than words ever could. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting golden light across the backyard, Willa leaned back and let it warm her skin. She closed her eyes and listened, not for a voice or a memory or a promise, just for the wind. And for once it didn't carry regret. It carried peace. The backyard had become her sanctuary. Each morning, Willa May stepped outside with a steaming cup of coffee and the old patchwork quilt wrapped around her shoulders. The early air was crisp with dew and the faint scent of clover. The world still undecided between slumber and wakefulness. Finn's swing, a little crooked now but charming in its imperfection, hung from the lowest branch of the maple tree. It swayed slightly with the wind, as if whispering, "We're still here. We're okay." Willa found peace in that. She had started pulling weeds from the overgrown garden bed beside the porch, not because anyone asked her to, but because it gave her hands something to do, something gentle. She worked slowly, learning the names of plants from an old book she'd found in Bo's hallway, Gardening for Dummies with dog-eared corners and mud stains on the cover. She never thought she'd be the kind of woman who found healing in dirt, but there it was, soil beneath her fingernails, sun on her neck, air in her lungs. It felt like resurrection in slow motion. Bo came out one morning to find her planting marigold seeds in neat, curved rows. "You don't have to do that," he said, setting down his coffee and leaning against the porch post. "I know," she replied without looking up. "That's why it helps." He studied her for a long moment. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, her face flushed from effort. There was a smudge of dirt on her cheek, and her hands were rougher now than they'd been when she first arrived. She looked alive. "Finn said you're teaching him about flowers now." "Just the names," Willa said, brushing hair from her brow. "He thinks lavender's a girl's name. He's not wrong." Bo chuckled, then stepped off the porch to crouch beside her. "You've changed this place," he said. "It was quiet before, but now it feels like it's breathing again." She paused. "I'm not sure if that's a good thing." "It is," he said. "It's a very good thing." Inside, Willa had started to reclaim other things too, little corners of comfort she hadn't touched in years. She baked, she sewed, she cleaned the windows just because it made the light fall prettier across the floor. She moved through the house like someone who belonged, even if she never said it aloud. Bo noticed. One night, as he walked past the den, he saw her curled on the couch, sketching. A worn leather journal lay open in her lap, pencil in hand. She didn't see him watching. Her sketches were dresses, but not the kind from bridal catalogs. These were different. One had sleeves made of crocheted lace, and a loose bodice meant for comfort, not display. Another was a two-piece outfit with soft lines and playful pockets, drawn for a body that moved and stretched and lived. They were beautiful, honest, and nothing like the dress in the box. She was designing for real women now. Maybe even for herself. The next morning, Darla showed up. She didn't knock, just waltzed through the front door with 2 bags of groceries and a tin of cinnamon rolls like she owned the place. "I figured you'd be hiding," she said to Willa, plunking the rolls on the table. "So I brought bribes." Willa laughed, startled but warm. "I'm not hiding. You're definitely hiding, but you're glowing, so I'm letting it slide." Bo watched from the doorway as the 2 women fell into easy conversation. Darla was the kind of friend who didn't ask permission to care. She filled the room with energy, pulling Willa into her orbit like it was the most natural thing in the world. "So," Darla said, lowering her voice once Finn went outside, "is this a situation, or are we just baking pies and pretending?" Willa blushed. "I'm not sure what it is. It's gentle, and I need gentle right now." Darla softened. "Then you're in the right place." That evening, as they sat around the fire pit in the backyard, Willa, Bo, and Finn roasting marshmallows, there was a stillness between them that didn't ask for explanation. Finn told a story about a talking fox who wore rain boots and stole cookies from giants. Willa laughed until her cheeks ached. Bo watched her with quiet amazement, wondering when her laughter had started to sound like part of the home he'd once thought was permanently hollow. "Did you have a backyard growing up?" Finn asked her suddenly. Willa hesitated. "Not one like this." "What kind, then?" She thought for a moment. "An apartment courtyard, concrete and one dying tree. I used to pretend it was a jungle." Bo chuckled. "Creative kid. Desperate," Willa said with a small smile. "But yeah, a little creative too." Finn nodded, satisfied with that answer. Then he turned to Bo. "Can she stay, like, forever?" Bo's eyes met Willa's across the firelight. She looked away first. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Willa stepped outside and stood beneath the stars. The marigolds had not yet bloomed, but she imagined them there, bright and unashamed, just waiting for their time. She placed a hand over her heart and whispered to the darkness, "I'm still here. Not perfect, not fixed, but still here." And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The box had been sitting untouched in the corner of the den, as still and silent as a closed chapter. But it was never really gone, just waiting. Like a forgotten letter on a mantel, it hummed quietly in Willa May's subconscious every time she passed it. She could almost hear it calling her name. 3 weeks had passed since the non-wedding, enough time for wounds to scab, for routines to root themselves quietly into her day, morning coffee with Bo, backyard stories with Finn, the occasional burst of laughter that startled her into remembering joy. But the box, it stayed untouched, sacred, terrifying. That morning, the house was quiet. Finn was at a friend's birthday party. Bo was in the garage, hammering at a half-built rocking chair. Willa stood alone in the den, barefoot, hands dusted with flour from a pie crust she'd abandoned mid-roll. She walked over to the box as if drawn by something deeper than memory, something closer to release. Her fingers hesitated at the ribbon. Ivory, soft, elegant. It had once felt full of promise. Now, it merely felt full of weight. She untied it slowly, then lifted the lid. There it was. The dress lay as carefully folded as the day she had packed it, every seam smooth, every thread in place. It hadn't yellowed, it hadn't aged, it had simply waited. Willa lifted it into her arms, the weight of it surprising her. She stood holding it like a memory she hadn't quite made peace with. Without fully knowing why, she slipped it on. The fabric hugged her in all the familiar places. The fitted bodice, the structured waistline, the gentle tapering of the skirt. She had designed it to hide and soften, to please someone who had never truly seen her. In the mirror, she saw not a bride, but a woman encased in expectations that no longer belonged to her. The dress was beautiful. Her stitching was precise. The lace sleeve grazed her arm like a whisper, but something felt wrong. She couldn't breathe, not because it was too tight, but because it wasn't hers anymore. Maybe it never had been. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at her hands, the fabric spread across her lap. So much effort, so much hope poured into a gown that was never worn, for a man who never arrived. It hadn't been a waste. It had been a lesson, She stood, removed the dress carefully, and laid it across the bed. Then, from the basket in the corner of the den, she pulled out her sketchbook. For weeks, she had drawn silhouettes of dresses for women shaped like her, for girls who laughed with their stomachs, for grandmothers with wide hips and wider stories. She'd sketched in the quiet, not sure why, not sure for whom. Now she knew. She picked up the scissors from her sewing table, held them above the bodice, paused. This wasn't destruction, it was reclamation. With a breath as steady as prayer, she cut the dress. Not in anger, but in reverence. She trimmed the bodice into a soft V-neck, loosened the waist, let the skirt breathe. She took the extra lace from the sleeves and fashioned a sash. Wide, strong, imperfect. By the time she finished, the sun was lower in the sky and her hands ached with satisfaction. The new dress lay across the bed like something reborn. Not a costume for someone else's dream, but a garment made for the woman she was now. She wore it to the front porch that evening, bare feet brushing the wooden steps. Beau looked up from sanding the chair, saw her, and stood without a word. Willa stepped into the golden glow of the setting sun. "It's the same dress," she said, before he could ask. Beau nodded. "It's different." "It is," she said. "Because I am." They stood in silence, the quiet not heavy this time, but holy. "I made it for someone else once," she continued. "Someone who never came." "And now?" he asked. She looked down at the hem, fluttering gently in the breeze. "Now I made it for me." That night, after Finn had fallen asleep and the dishes had been put away, Willa pulled a folded envelope from her purse. She had written it the night after the wedding, that wasn't, but never sent it. Never had the courage to even read it again. Now, she sat on the back porch and unfolded it with calm fingers. "Rick, I don't hate you. I don't love you either, not anymore. I think, deep down, I always knew you weren't mine. But I wanted to be chosen so badly that I ignored the truth. I thought if I made myself small enough, quiet enough, pleasing enough, maybe you'd stay. But I'm not small, and I'm not sorry anymore. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope I find what I've been missing. Myself." She smiled, folded the letter, and tossed it into the fire pit. The flames took it quickly. No protest, no drama, just release. In the days that followed, Willa began altering more than dresses. She rearranged the den furniture so it flowed better with the light. She asked Darla if she could rent a small studio space above the bakery for a tailoring business focused on real body bridal. She even accepted her first order from a widowed schoolteacher remarrying in her 60s, who asked if Willa could make her a dress that felt like ease. And she could, because now she understood that word. On a Saturday morning, Finn ran into the kitchen, hair tousled, arms flailing. "Miss Willa," he shouted, "you forgot the swing." She blinked. "What?" "In your dress, the one you fixed. You forgot the swing I made you." She knelt down. "Then I guess we'll just have to sew it in." His eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," she said, and took the little felt swing he held out. "Some things are worth keeping close." And as she stitched the tiny keepsake into the seam of her dress, Willa realized something profound. She hadn't just altered a garment, she'd altered her story. The past has a way of finding you, especially when you've finally begun to move on. It was a Wednesday. The air was thick with the smell of fresh rain, and Willa May stood in the kitchen, pulling a warm pie from the oven, when she heard the knock. Not the knock of a friend, not the hesitant tap of a neighbor. This was sharp, certain. She wiped her hands on her apron, glanced toward the den where Finn was humming over a puzzle, and opened the door. There he was, Rick Montrose, in a crisp navy jacket, holding his phone in one hand, the other shoved deep into his pocket like he was trying to anchor himself. Willa blinked. Rick looked exactly the same. That same handsome, curated face. That same unnerving calm. But something was different now. She wasn't standing beneath a church bell tower waiting to be loved. She was standing in her own breath, in a house filled with cinnamon and second chances. "Willa," he said. She didn't reply, just waited. "I heard you were still in town." He cleared his throat, glanced at the porch swing, at the boots beside the mat, at the children's chalk drawing still visible on the sidewalk. "This is a nice place," he added, like he needed something to say. "What do you want, Rick?" Her voice was steady, not sharp, not afraid, just done. He looked startled. "I wanted to see you, to explain." "There's no explanation that starts with a text and ends with silence," she said. Rick shifted. "I was scared. You were just so much. Everything was moving fast and you mean I was too big," she said, not as accusation but truth. Too present, too inconvenient to love in public. Rick's mouth opened, then closed. Willa tilted her head. "You wanted a paper doll. I'm not that." "I know that now," he said. "I was a coward." She nodded. "Yes, you were." A long silence passed between them. The rain began again, gentle, insistent. "I'm sorry," he said, softer this time. "I believe you," Willa replied, "but I don't need it anymore." Rick blinked again, truly rattled now. "You're different." "I am." He looked at her for a long moment. "Can I take you for coffee? Just to talk?" She smiled politely. "Rick, this isn't anger talking. This is peace. I don't need coffee. I don't need closure. I got something better." "What's that?" She gestured behind her, toward the open den, the kitchen filled with warmth, the garden beyond the window. "A life, one that doesn't need you in it." He left soon after. She watched him go, not out of bitterness, but with a quiet kind of gratitude. She had been a woman who once begged for crumbs of affection. Now she was someone who made her own table, set it with care, and invited only those who brought nourishment. When she turned back into the house, Finn looked up from his puzzle. "Who was that?" "No one I need anymore," Willa said, kissing the top of his head. That evening, she found Bo in the backyard, sanding the frame of what looked like a bookshelf. "You okay?" he asked without looking up. She nodded. Rick came by. Bo's hand stilled. He looked up, jaw tight. "It's fine," she said. "He came looking for something, but he was already too late." Bo searched her face, then nodded. "You handled it?" "I did, and I didn't even shake." He smiled. "I'm proud of you." Willa picked up a piece of sandpaper and joined him. They worked in silence, an intimacy stronger than touch. Later that night, Willa sat on the porch, sketchbook in her lap. The stars overhead were soft and scattered, like glitter spilled across a velvet sky. She sketched a new design. A dress with strong seams and bold pleats, made to move, to laugh, to stretch and stand. She called it the Reclamation. It would be her first piece in the new collection she hadn't told anyone about yet, not even Bo. But it was forming, just like she was. In the following days, something shifted subtly in the house. Finn clung a little tighter when she tucked him in. Bo lingered a little longer in the kitchen each morning. The three of them moved as a unit now, not in obligation but in rhythm. One afternoon, while baking with Finn, Willa felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find the boy holding out a drawing. It was a house. Their house. With a swing and flowers and 3 people, one tall, one medium, one small. All holding hands. "You forgot the dog," she teased, voice catching. He beamed. "I'm adding him tomorrow." "Who are they?" she asked. He pointed. "That's me, that's Dad, and that's you." She couldn't speak. "You look happy," he said matter-of-factly. "You should stay." That night, Willa stood in front of the mirror, wearing the dress she had reworked from the remnants of her old life. It fit. Not just her body, but her becoming. She touched the little felt swing Finn had given her, now sewn gently into the inner seam. Some pieces you carry, others you wear close. All of them you grow from. She wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. She had already chosen herself. Before the sun rose, before Finn's sleepy voice called for breakfast, or Bo's boots hit the porch steps, Willa was walking. She hadn't meant to make it a routine. It started the morning after Rick left. Something in her needed air, needed motion. She slipped on a pair of worn sneakers and followed the gravel path that curved behind the Carter home, and dipped gently into the golden fields beyond. And the next morning, she walked again. And again. It wasn't exercise, not exactly. There was no goal, no calorie counter, no before and after in mind. It was movement for the sake of being alive. For the sheer miracle of having legs that could carry her, lungs that could breathe clean country air, eyes that could catch the first blush of dawn on the horizon. She walked to remember. She walked to forget. Mostly, she walked to listen. The rustle of the leaves, the distant hum of cows from neighboring farms, the gravel crunching underfoot, her own heartbeat. All of it grounded her in the present, gently releasing the clamor of what-ifs and used-to-bes. She passed a line of trees that bowed slightly over the path, forming a canopy that reminded her of wedding arches. But unlike the one she never walked under, this one welcomed her with no judgment, no expectation, just grace. After a week of morning walks, Finn joined her. He insisted on wearing a cowboy hat and carried a plastic thermos full of orange juice. "You need company," he said, "and I'm a very good walker." He was slow, always stopping to pick up stones or chase butterflies, but Willa didn't mind. They talked about school and birds and dinosaurs with too many teeth. And sometimes they didn't talk at all. She liked that most. On one particular morning, Finn looked up at her and asked, "Were you always this strong?" Willa blinked. "What do you mean?" "You carry heavy stuff," he said. "Feelings. My teacher says feelings are heavier than bricks." Willa smiled. "Your teacher sounds smart." "She is. She cried once in class and then told us crying was how people leak pain out so there's room for hope again." They walked a little farther in silence. "Did you cry?" he asked. "I did." "Did it work?" Willa thought about it. "Yeah, I think it did." Bo noticed the walks. He didn't say much, but one morning, as she returned to the house, breath warm against the cool dawn, he handed her a folded bandana. "For the sweat," he said with a small grin. She took it. "Is this a subtle way of telling me I stink?" "No," he replied. "That was yesterday." She laughed, a clear, genuine sound that made Bo's eyes soften. It wasn't flirtation. It was something deeper. Admiration, respect, maybe even awe. He saw her, and she knew it. That evening, she sat with her sketchbook, the garden visible through the kitchen window. The marigolds she planted weeks ago had begun to bloom, fiery bursts of orange and gold like hope pushing through soil. She began to draw again. Not wedding dresses this time. Not even occasion pieces. Just clothes for living, wide-legged pants with soft pleats, aprons with deep pockets, dresses that moved with the body instead of restraining it. She titled the page, Freedom Collection. That same night, Bo knocked gently on the doorframe as she sketched. "You've been busy," he said. She nodded. "It helps me think." He stepped in, glanced at the drawings. "These are real." She looked at him. I mean, they look like something people want to wear, he continued, not just to impress, but to feel right. That's the goal, she said, closing the sketchbook, to make clothes that feel like home. You've been doing that here too, he said. She looked at him, puzzled. You came here with a box full of heartbreak, he said. Now you're giving this house a new rhythm. My son laughs more. I breathe easier. Willa's throat tightened. I didn't mean to change anything. You didn't try. That's what makes it real. They stood there for a long moment, silence filling in the spaces their words couldn't reach. Beau took a slow breath. I've been afraid to hope for too long, but some mornings when I hear you laughing in the kitchen with Finn, I let myself wonder. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. That night, Willa couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from a kind of buzzing joy she hadn't felt in years. She slipped quietly onto the porch, wrapped in her favorite shawl, and watched the stars blink into view. In her lap was the swing Finn had made her. She held it gently between her fingers, its tiny wooden seat smoothed by her touch. It wasn't just a craft project. It was a symbol of her place here, of her role, of the fact that even in silence she mattered. The next morning she walked again, this time alone. The path felt different now, less like escape, more like prayer. She paused beneath the tree arch, sunlight filtering through like a benediction, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the life that let her begin again. She stood tall, heart steady, breath calm, and when she turned back toward the house, she wasn't walking away from anything anymore. She was walking toward it. When Willa May first moved to the little town of Whitford 6 years ago, no one paid her much mind. She was the quiet dressmaker, the woman who lived alone in the upstairs apartment over the hardware store. She delivered wedding gowns and garment bags, spoke politely but never lingered, and left church just before the closing hymn. Most people saw her but didn't really see her. And that was fine. At the time, invisibility felt like safety. But things had changed. Now, when Willa walked into Darla's bakery, the bell above the door chimed as always, but instead of nods and half glances, she was greeted with smiles. Warm, real ones. "Morning, Willa," called Hank from the barbershop chair. "Those marigolds you planted outside are doing real nice," added Maybelline as she filled her cup with sweet tea. Willa offered soft thanks, a small wave, but inside something shifted. Not because of the attention, but because, for once, it didn't make her shrink. She wasn't being looked at for her size or her silence. She was being recognized for her presence, and that was new. Darla placed a plate of warm cinnamon rolls on the counter and winked. "I gave you the biggest one." "Why?" Willa asked with a laugh. "Because I heard someone say you're glowing," Darla teased, "and I figured we should fuel the glow." Willa blushed, tearing a piece from the roll. "It's not glow, it's sweat. Finn makes me chase chickens now." Chickens? His new obsession. He swears one winked at him. Darla snorted. Careful. First chickens, next wedding bells. Willa rolled her eyes. But the warmth stayed in her chest long after the roll was gone. Later that afternoon, as she walked back to the house with a sack of flour tucked under one arm, she passed Pastor Vernon, sweeping the steps of the church. "Miss Willa," he called, "I was hoping to catch you." She paused. "Everything okay?" He set the broom aside. "More than okay. I have a request, if you're willing." She tilted her head. "You may know, the Fall Apple Festival's coming up next weekend." She nodded. "I remember." "Well, this year, we're putting together a fashion showcase. Nothing fancy, just a small event to honor local makers. And I thought, perhaps you'd share a few of your designs?" Willa blinked. I'm not sure Darla showed me one of your sketches. Said you're making dresses that breathe. That move with the body, she said. I think people need to see that. Willa hesitated. I don't model, and I'm not. You don't need to be anything more than you already are, he said gently. You've given this town a bit of itself back. Let us celebrate that. Her throat tightened. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. As she walked home, heart humming with nerves and something like pride, Willa realized something beautiful. The town had changed. But more importantly, she had allowed herself to be seen. Bo was in the garden when she returned, coaxing wads from between the squash plants. Busy day? He asked, standing to wipe his hands on his jeans. She smiled. I was invited to show my work at the Apple Festival. His brows lifted. That's incredible. It's terrifying. He shrugged. That's how you know it matters. She set the flower down and leaned against the porch rail. Would you come? If I do it? He looked at her like the answer had always been obvious. Willa May, I'd stand in the front row and cheer like a fool. She laughed. Please don't cheer. No promises. That night, Willa stayed up late at the kitchen table. Patterns and fabric swatches spread around her like petals. She didn't want glamour. She wanted truth. Dresses that wrapped around the body like memory and kindness. She sewed late into the night. And with each stitch, she felt something deeper take root. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was offering. On the morning of the festival, the church lawn came alive with booths, apple cider barrels, and the kind of joyful noise small towns do best. Laughter, music, generations woven together. Willa stood in the tiny backstage tent, adjusting the final pin on her own dress. A soft olive green piece with wide sleeves and a gentle waistline that hugged her curves instead of hiding them. Darla stepped in, wearing one of Willa's new designs, a sunflower yellow wrap dress with oversized buttons and secret pockets. You ready? Darla asked. No. Perfect, you're human. Finn popped his head through the curtain. Can I be your announcer? Willa blinked. You want to? Please? Bo's voice followed. He's been practicing. Willa exhaled. All right, but go slow. She peeked through the curtain as the folding chairs filled up. She saw Bo in the front row, holding a sign Finn had made that said, Willa makes magic. It was crooked and perfect. Her heart thudded like a bass drum. When Finn took the mic, slightly too tall for him, his voice echoed with pride. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my friend Miss Willa. She makes clothes that don't hurt your belly. She says people should feel good when they move. So now she's going to show you how to feel awesome. Laughter and applause followed. Willa stepped onto the makeshift runway, gravel underfoot, sun in her face. She didn't pose. She didn't strut. She walked, tall, calm, herself, and the crowd saw her. Really saw her. Not the girl in the bridal shop mirror. Not the woman crying on church steps, but Willa May Carter, stitched together by choice and healing. The applause was still echoing in Willa May's ears long after the small-town runway had been rolled back into storage. She stood behind the church hall, her heart thrumming with something she could barely name. Not pride, not even joy, something deeper, something like arrival. The festival had gone better than she imagined. The crowd hadn't just clapped, they had leaned in, smiled, nodded, seen her. She'd walked in a dress that wasn't made to hide her body or prove anything to anyone. And in doing so, she gave silent permission to every other woman in the crowd to simply be. Backstage, older women gathered around her, eyes shining. One, a widowed teacher named Mrs. Langford, said, I haven't worn a dress in 10 years, but if you make one that feels like this, I'd wear it to the grocery store and to my grave. Another whispered, "When you walked out in that green dress, I forgot all the mean things I used to think about my arms." And perhaps most touching of all was the quiet woman with silver hair who waited until everyone else had left to speak. "I was supposed to get married in 1962, she said softly. "But he left. I never told anyone. I buried the dress in the attic. But now, maybe I'll bring it down. Let it see the light again." Willa didn't say much, just took her hand, held it and nodded, because no words were really needed. That evening, as the last of the caramel apples were packed away and the hay bales returned to their corners, Willa walked home through the golden hush of dusk. Bo and Finn flanked her like bookends. "You were the best one," Finn announced. "Except for maybe the guy who juggled flaming sticks." "I'll take second to fire juggling," Willa laughed. Bo smiled but said nothing. His silence was warm, steady, protective. When they reached the porch, he lingered behind as Finn ran inside to grab a leftover apple fritter. "I've been wanting to tell you something," Bo said, voice low. Willa turned to him, the porch light catching in her eyes. "You've changed this town," he said. "But more than that, you've changed me." She looked at him, her breath caught between ribs. "I used to live in silence," he continued. "Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what to say to the grief." He paused. "But now I hear laughter again, from Finn, from me, from you, and it feels like the world has a song again." Willa's throat tightened. "I was never looking to fix anything. I know, that's why it worked." Later that night, Willa stepped into the den and found the box. The box! She hadn't opened it since she altered the original dress and created something entirely new. But now, somehow, she knew what to do. She sat on the floor, opened the box gently, and pulled out the original bodice, the extra lace she hadn't used, and the sheer sleeves that once made her arms feel hidden and ashamed. Piece by piece, she began pinning them to a dress form, but she wasn't putting them back together. She was making something entirely different. The next day, she called Darla. "Bring me the woman who said she hadn't worn a dress in 10 years, Willa said. "Tell her I have an idea." Within the week, a new design was born. A soft cotton linen blend, dyed gently with marigold petals, sleeveless with high sides and a low hem, easy, elegant, and alive. They named it the Reclaim. And just like that, Willa's old dress, the one she never wore, was transformed into a legacy of healing. Not just for her, but for any woman who had ever felt like she needed to shrink to be loved. Willa's studio slowly came together in the empty space above Darla's bakery. Bo helped her refinish the floors. Finn painted stars on the inside of the closet. Darla brought scones every Friday, calling it Fashion Fuel. The front window displayed a simple hand-painted sign, Willa May, clothing for bodies that breathe. It wasn't flashy, it was honest. One afternoon, as Willa stood adjusting a dress on the mannequin, the bell above the door rang. It was Pastor Vernon. He handed her a small envelope. "I thought you might want this," he said, his voice kind. Inside was a photo someone had taken during the festival. Willa, mid-step, smiling, the green dress swaying around her as if it had caught the breeze of her new life. On the back, someone had written in neat, looping script, "The dress she never wore led her to the life she'd always wanted." Willa's hands trembled as she placed the photo on her desk. She had spent years believing her worth was conditional. Tied to a dress, a man, a wedding. Now she understood. She hadn't been waiting to be loved. She'd been waiting to recognize herself. And now she had. The studio was quiet. Sunlight poured through the large front windows in thick ribbons, warming the wooden floor and casting soft shadows across bolts of fabric and dress forms. Willa May stood barefoot at her work table, humming a tune she didn't remember learning, pressing seams with steady hands. The scent of marigolds drifted in through the open window. Below, Darla's bakery oven was in full swing, and the laughter of schoolchildren echoed down the sidewalk. There was a time, not long ago, when this kind of stillness would have unnerved Willa. She would have heard the quiet and mistaken it for loneliness. Now, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like peace. Her studio had only been open a few weeks, but word had spread fast. Orders came not in floods but in honest drips. Women who walked in nervously, asking if Willa really made clothes for people like me, and left feeling taller than they walked in. Some brought their mothers. Some brought dresses they hadn't dared wear since their 20s. Some brought nothing but the hope that someone might understand what they needed without them having to explain it. Willa never advertised weight loss, never promised transformation. She simply offered kindness in cotton, freedom in every seam, and space for women to exhale in their own skin. That afternoon, she returned to the Carter house to find Beau on the porch, sanding the arms of a newly built rocking chair. He looked up at her and smiled in that quiet way that always reached his eyes first. "You're early," he said. "I missed home," she replied, before realizing what she'd said. Home. Beau set down his tools, brushing sawdust from his hands. Finn's inside making a diorama of the moon. It's mostly glitter. Willa laughed. "That's an accurate representation." They sat together on the porch steps. The sky was just beginning to tint toward evening, pink melting into gold. The silence between them was familiar now, soft, warm, trusted. "Did I ever tell you," Beau said, "how I met my wife?" Willa shook her head. "We were 16. She threw a snowball at my face and knocked my glasses off." Willa smiled. "Sounds like love." It was, the messy kind. We fought over movie choices and which way the toilet paper roll should face. But we loved big, loud. She made everything brighter. When she died, I thought, that was it. One great love. No more. Willa watched him carefully. He didn't speak in metaphors. Beau was a man who only said things when he meant them. "I didn't expect to feel anything again," he continued. "Then you showed up with a broken heart and a box you were afraid to open. And you didn't fix me, Willa. You just sat with me in the quiet until I remembered how to feel again." Willa blinked against the sting in her eyes. "You taught me," he said, "that love doesn't always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it grows slowly, patiently, like the marigolds in your garden, or a second breath after a long cry." He turned to her then. "Willa May, I think I've been falling in love with you for weeks." The world seemed to hold its breath. Willa exhaled slowly. "You know what's funny?" she whispered. He raised an eyebrow. "I've been falling too, but I didn't want to hope. Not again. Not after what I've lost." "You're allowed to hope," Beau said. "You're allowed to want more." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "I don't want a fairy tale. I don't want saving." "I know," he said. "I just want to stand beside you in the real stuff. The quiet mornings, the long walks, the laundry and the school pickups and the days when it all feels too heavy. I want to carry some of that weight if you'll let me." Willa reached out, took his hand. "You already are." That night she tucked Finn in, and as she reached for his blanket, he handed her a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "Homework," he said. "But fun homework. I had to draw my family." She opened it. There they were, Beau with a hammer, Willa in her green dress, and Finn holding both their hands beneath a bright yellow sun. At the bottom, he'd written in shaky block letters, "My family, Dad, me, and Mom knew one. Willa smiled so hard it ached. "You really think I'm your mom now?" she asked gently. He nodded. "You make dinner and tell me bedtime stories, and you hug me when I'm scared. That's what moms do." She pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Then I'm honored." Later, Bo found her on the back porch, sketching by candlelight. The drawing was rough, but he could see it clearly. A wedding dress unlike any other. Soft lines, pockets, a sash with a tiny embroidered swing. He sat beside her without speaking. "Don't get any ideas," she teased. "No pressure," he said, smiling. "But if you ever wear a dress like that, I'd like to be the one standing across from you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm not afraid of that anymore," she whispered. And together, beneath the stars, they sat in the quiet kind of love that didn't need to be announced to be real. It had grown slowly, patiently, like something sacred. The morning of the wedding dawned gently. Not in bells or fanfare, not in a flurry of makeup artists or orchestrated perfection, but in stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a long journey home. Willa May stood barefoot in the garden, dew brushing her ankles. The marigolds had bloomed in full now, sunbursts of gold against a backdrop of green. She reached out and touched a blossom, smiling at its sturdiness. She had planted them when she wasn't sure she belonged. Now they greeted her like old friends. Inside the house, Finn was running around in a button-down shirt that refused to stay tucked. "Where's my dinosaur tie?" he called. Bo chuckled from the hallway, already dressed in a crisp white shirt and suspenders. He had trimmed his beard the night before and looked, Willa noted, quietly handsome. Not showy, just right. Willa smiled to herself. There had been no formal proposal, no dramatic down-on-one-knee moment, just a quiet evening on the porch, a shared glance and the simple question Bo had asked as he handed her a cup of coffee. Should we build the rest of this life together? And her answer had been steady, sure. Yes, let's build something that breathes. The dress she wore wasn't white. It was the softest shade of sage green, like new leaves in spring. She had sewn it herself, of course. Wide sleeves, flowing skirt, a sash at the waist embroidered with tiny symbols only she and Finn would understand. There was a felt swing, stitched carefully near the hem. A marigold. A single star. The fabric moved when she walked. And when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a bride trying to prove her worth. She saw a woman who already knew it. The ceremony took place beneath the maple tree in the backyard. There were hay bales covered in quilts, mason jars with wildflowers, and folding chairs filled with townsfolk who had once looked past her, but now looked at her with affection and respect. Pastor Vernon stood at the front, smiling like a man who loved his job more on days like this. Darla handed Willa her bouquet, sunflowers and rosemary tied with twine. "You good?" she whispered. "I'm more than good," Willa said. "I'm ready." Finn walked her down the makeshift aisle, grinning like he'd invented joy itself. "You look like a queen," he whispered. Willa blinked against the tears. "Then you must be my prince." "Can I still be a dinosaur too?" "Absolutely." Bo waited beneath the tree, his hands steady, his eyes soft. No tuxedo, no fanfare. Just a man in love with the life he'd built, and the woman who helped him remember how. When Willa reached him, she didn't feel nerves. She felt rooted, like everything that had once broken her had bloomed into this moment. The vows were simple. There was no talk of perfect love or forever fantasies. Instead, they promised real things. "I promise to sit in the quiet with you when words are too heavy. I promise to laugh with you, even when the laundry's piled high. I promise to see you, even when the world forgets how. And I promise to walk beside you, one morning at a time." When Pastor Vernon pronounced them husband and wife, there was no loud cheer, just a collective breath from the crowd, like everyone had been holding hope and finally exhaled. Bo kissed her, and Willa kissed him back, not like a fairy tale ending, but like a beginning they'd chosen with eyes wide open. The reception was held right there in the yard. There were mismatched dishes, fried chicken, and Darla's famous caramel cake. Finn gave a speech about how love was like building a Lego castle. You gotta keep adding the pieces even when you step on one, and it hurts. Laughter echoed across the fields. The sun dipped lower, and Willa found herself sitting on the porch swing Bo had repaired just for this day, watching her new husband dance with her son under string lights. She hadn't lost anything by not wearing the first dress. She had gained everything by choosing herself. Later that night, long after the guests had gone and Finn had fallen asleep with frosting on his cheek, Willa stepped out into the garden barefoot, stars above her like blessings. She looked up at the sky, at all the dark space and quiet wonder. Then she whispered, "Thank you for the man who saw me, for the boy who called me Mom, and for the girl I used to be, the one who finally learned how to love her own story." She wasn't the woman left at the altar anymore. She was the woman who stayed, who rose, who bloomed. And as she walked back toward the porch, a soft wind stirred the marigolds beside her. It sounded a lot like applause. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what part of this story stayed with you the most? We read every comment, and your words remind us why these stories matter. If you'd like to hear more true healing stories like this, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, and it means the world to us. Thank you for spending this time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate the power of one open door.